Part of the start of any friendship or relationship is sharing a little bit about who you are. And so for the next 3 episodes, I'm going to share a little bit about my professional background and history through the context of 3 different drink categories or groupings. The first, today's episode, will be about coffee and some coffee drinks. Next week, I'll share about beer and my history in the brewing industry with some drinks that include beer. And then the third week, I'm going to keep a little bit secret for now, but we'll get to in a couple weeks. In 2009, I started working for a coffee shop that was right across the street from the college campus where I was taking classes. And at that point in time, I didn't really know anything about coffee. I got the job really because it seemed like a cool place to work. It was a fun environment of a lot of people that were young and listened to fun, cool music. And one of the fun things about working in a college town is that there was sort of a seasonality to the folks that worked there. And so whenever folks would start in the fall for a new semester, there was this joke about being part of the same pledge class. I was never Greek affiliated. This was probably as close as I got. But one of the guys I started working with is still one of my best friends today. After about a year, I moved to a different school and started working for a different coffee shop where I became the manager. I worked there for a couple of years while I finished my undergrad degree, and then ended up moving back to Waco, where I live now, and worked at the same coffee shop again. But this time, I worked with the owner to create a position called head barista. This was a position that was primarily focused on education, not only education of the employees in the building, but also the customers that came into the shop. So for today, we actually have 3 different drinks planned. So the first drink in this episode is one that's kind of adjacent to an espresso martini, but doesn't use espresso or vodka. Firstly, espresso at home is super difficult. I know there's folks that have some of those automatic machines that make a decent cup of coffee. I prefer, when making drinks, to actually use cold brew. We're going to make the drink cold anyway, so why not start that way? And then instead of using vodka, we're going to be using a Jamaican high ester rum. And so this is going to be somewhere closer maybe to a Mai Tai, but because it uses Orgeat and lime juice, but we're going to be using coffee and it'll be a shaken drink. So let's get started there. So this is the drink I'm kind of playfully calling a cold brew Martiki. Cold brew instead of espresso, Martiki instead of martini. A joke is always better when you have to explain it. And I'm just going to start building it while I'm talking about it. So this is Smith & Cross. It's a traditional Jamaican rum. It's made with 100% pot stills and has a really great sort of molasses-y high ester quality to it. So I'm going to use 1.5 ounces of this right into the tin. Then I'm going to get 1.5 ounces of cold brew coffee. This is some cold brew that I made actually yesterday. Ratios are also important when you're making coffee. And so this cold brew is a 7-to-1 ratio. That means 7 parts water to 1 part coffee. I'll put the recipe down in the show notes below. We got 1.5 ounces here. Little mess, no problem. And then to this, we're going to add some Orgeat. Orgeat is traditionally used in a lot of different tiki drinks. It's an almond-based sweetener. It still uses sugar, but it uses almonds for flavoring as well. So 1/2 ounce of Orgeat, straight on in. And then finally, we will be using 1/2 ounce of lime juice. This kind of plays with the tiki idea also. The rum, the Orgeat, the lime are all very traditional in tiki drinks. I didn't pre-squeeze this one, so this will take a little bit of time, but let's do 1/2 ounce of lime. We'll get some ice and we'll shake. So now we have some ice, and I've also got a little prepared cup over here. And so this is just a clear ice cube. I've got the link below on how I make those, and a little lime wheel that I put right on top just for presentation, kind of pre-garnished it already. I'll throw in the ice and we'll shake. Strain this right over the top. Man, that lime and rum aroma is amazing. I'm pouring it kind of off to the center here so it doesn't mess with the lime and the ice cube. We'll see if I can get that lime to stay on top. It mostly wants to. There we go. Now let's give it a taste. Yeah, this is a fun nose. The lime and coffee really works well together for me. I'm not sure if you've ever had like a coffee tonic or an espresso tonic, but oftentimes there's a lime squeezed in there too. Yeah, it's really fun. It drinks like a mai tai a little bit. It doesn't have the orange liqueur that a mai tai would, but it has that richness, that sort of coffee sweetness, chocolate. Yeah, as you'll notice on the surface too, there's a little bit of that foam hanging around, and that's just from the agitation from shaking the drink. Some of the oils in the coffee also help to kind of bring that around. Try it out at home. Let me know what you think. Before we get into the next drink, go ahead and like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos like this. I selected this next drink because it's connected to Portland, Oregon. And when my wife and I lived in Portland in 2014 and 2015, we were so broke and we didn't really know it and we didn't really care. But we used to go as often as we could to this little bar downtown. Not little, it's a pretty big bar connected to a hotel, but it was downtown and it was called Clyde Common. And they used to do $5 cocktails and like a $6 burger. And although that bar unfortunately did close during COVID, the guy who ran the bar program was a guy named Jeffrey Morgenthaler, and he has since opened a bar called Pacific Standard. I got to go there about a year and a half ago, and the thing that stands out about that experience the most is probably the single drink called the Keoke Coffee. Morgenthaler's recipe calls for an American brandy called Sacred Bond, which is bottled in bond, 100 proof, or 50% ABV. And I didn't have access to that one. I couldn't find it. But what I do have is a local distillery in town called Balcones that makes a spirit called Rumble. All right, so this is a drink I'm actually just going to build right in the glass. This is a little bit of a two-part coffee mug here with a cute little handle. I'm going to leave it out to begin with just so you can see the whole cup. And let's start with this Rumble. Like I said, in the Morgenthaler recipe, this would be that American brandy, but this is pretty close. So we're going to do an ounce of Rumble. And then to that, we're going to add 3/4 of an ounce of something called Creme de Cacao. Tempus Fugit is a Swiss distillery that makes a lot of hard to find cocktail ingredients really well. It's not that the ingredients are hard to find. You can find Creme de Cacao from a lot of different producers, but they don't tend to be super top shelf. Whereas Tempus Fugit just does an amazing job at things that are not always highbrow ingredients, but they do it with really high quality. Here's 3/4 of an ounce of creme de cacao. Then to that, we will add a little bit of syrup that Morgenthaler calls for. It's a sort of a molasses and sugar-based recipe. It actually uses 2-to-1 sugar to water, which is a rich, simple syrup. And I will throw that recipe down in the description. This one also uses a little bit of molasses. You can see just how thick it is there. But we'll throw that in and just give it a little stir. And to that, we're going to top up with coffee almost to the top. We'll give this a little bit of a mix. We won't want to mix it again once the cream is in. And then we will pour this shaken cream right over the top. Try to float it is the idea. Let's go just a little bit of this right on top. And then we'll dust a little bit of cinnamon on top too. I think mainly for the visual, but it also helps the aroma a little bit. Give a little bit of complexity, if you will. There we go. Let's give it a try. Cheers. One of the cool things about this drink is just that experience, that like the warming sensation of not only the coffee, but also the booze that's in it. And then also that upper lip, just getting to feel the coolness of that rich cream is just, it's amazing. I guess I probably should have put it in this fun handle here. Look at that. Impressive. Yeah, such a fun experience. I'm getting cinnamon on myself. Something that's also become important to me in recent years is sometimes not drinking. And so I think that removing alcohol from your diet every now and again can be a great way to kind of reset and also really appreciate once you get to come back to it. Or some people abstain completely, and that's great. I think that part of hosting and having people over to your house and being able to make drinks for them is having something on your menu that they can have confidently and that they can enjoy. I am going to be using Angostura bitters in this cocktail, which does contain alcohol. There's a company called All the Bitter, which actually makes totally non-alcoholic bitters as well. And they have one that's called their Aromatic bitters that would work great for this cocktail as well. But yeah, I'm going to build a drink called a cold fashioned, which uses cold brew, a non-alcoholic whiskey alternative from a distillery called Ritual. So now I'll build a drink called a cold fashioned. Here's the glass. It's been in the freezer for a little while, and I've also already got a big ice cube right in there. I'm going to throw a couple dashes of Angostura bitters. As I mentioned, though, you can use a non-alcoholic aromatic bitters as well. Do 3 dashes in there, kind of right over the top of the cube. For this one, I'm using a semi-rich simple syrup, which is 1.5 parts sugar to 1 part water. I'll just use a bar spoon of that syrup here today. A bar spoon is roughly equal to a teaspoon if you're using teaspoon measurements, or 5 milliliters. A bar spoon, even though not totally necessary, can be kind of a cool measuring tool as well. And then to this, we will need 1.5 ounces of this non-alcoholic whiskey alternative from Ritual. And we'll do 1 ounce of the cold brew that we used in the first recipe here today too. So it's that 7-to-1 ratio, 7 parts water to 1 part coffee. And then I let it sit for about 24 hours to extract fully. Really great aroma on it. Right on the top. And then we'll give this a little stir. Sometimes people will build an old fashioned in a mixing glass and then pour it over the big cube. It's not totally necessary. With a drink like this, because it's going to be served on the ice cube, it'll continue to dilute on its own. My main goal here is to ensure that everything's well incorporated, well mixed, and that it gets a little chill on it. And then I'm also going to garnish it kind of like I would normally an old fashioned with a big swath of orange. That right over the top. Give it a twist and toss it in. Cheers. So yeah, aromatically, I mean, obviously there's an addition of coffee, so it's not going to smell exactly like a cold brew. Yeah, it's great. It's got a good richness to it. This particular non-alcoholic whiskey has a little bit of a capsaicin-y, sort of spicy burn to it, which replicates some of the alcohol burn that you'd normally find. So I don't think you're going to completely fool anybody one for one, whether this is regular full-strength bourbon or whether it's a non-alcoholic alternative. But nonetheless, it's a nice alternative. It's a good one. And yeah, on the nose, what you smell first is that orange peel, and you smell the bitters, which is really cool. It feels a little bit like an old-fashioned. You can sip on it slowly with this big cube. That's all for the coffee drinks today. Thank you for coming with me today on this caffeinated experience. If you have any coffee drinks that you like, feel free to share me a note in the comments. I'd love to see what folks are making at home and how people are using coffee and drinks, whether alcoholic or not. At the end of the day, drinks are for fun, and my goal is to teach people enough so that they can share that fun with the people they love. Come and be amazed at what you can do. Cheers.